Welcome to History of Dogs Breakfast. I'm your host, and today we're taking a slight step back on our road to World War II and having a look at Germany. But before we delve deep into German history and their influence on World War II and the world as a whole, I want you to imagine this. Germany in the 1920s, a nation scarred by the Great War and navigating the political and economic chaos of the Weimar Republic. In this alternate timeline, Adolf Hitler never rises to power. The German Workers' Party, also known as the DAP, remains under the unassuming leadership of Anton Drexler, whose ambitions never extend beyond uniting a small group of nationalist workers. Without Hitler's fiery speeches, racial extremism, and imperialist vision, the party stagnates as a minor political movement, incapable of reshaping Germany, let alone the world. By the 1930s, Germany's political landscape takes a different turn. While dissatisfaction with the Treaty of Versailles remains widespread, no single figure or party is able to unify and weaponize that anger. The fragmented Weimar Republic survives its turmoil, battered but intact. Hyperinflation and the Great Depression still pose significant challenges, but Germany remains inwardly focused, avoiding the militarization and expansionism that Hitler championed. Without Nazi aggression, Europe sidesteps the devastating descent into World War II. France and Britain remain wary of Germany, but contend with a nation focused on recovery rather than dominance. Mussolini's Italy, lacking a strong German ally, faces greater resistance to its imperial ambitions. Japan too finds itself without a strategic partner in its Pacific endeavours, altering its path in Asia and its conflict with the United States. Globally, the ripple effects are profound. The Holocaust never occurs, sparing millions of lives and preserving Jewish communities across Europe, and most likely either not creating Israel or the creation is a lot slower and more accepted. Without the urgency of war, technological advancements like radar, jet propulsion, and nuclear weapons unfold more slowly, delaying the onset of the nuclear age and space race. Colonial empires endure longer, as Europe's powers remain stronger in the absence of World War II's devastation. Decolonisation proceeds, but more gradually, reshaping the global political landscape at a slower pace. And yet, this is not the world we inhabit. We do not inhabit one where peace is a much sought after commodity, nor one built on the premise of a greater understanding towards others. The reality of Germany in 1918 to 1923 was far more tumultuous, and it laid the foundation for Adolf Hitler's rise. His ability to harness resentment, economic instability, and nationalist fervour would propel the Nazi Party from obscurity to infamy, leading to the most destructive conflict in human history. This alternate timeline is not the reality of what happened or what is happening now. On today's episode of History of Dogs Breakfast, we will delve into the horrific reality that was the formation years of the Nazi Party, and some of the major players, including the most villainous villain of them all, Adolf Hitler. A combination that would lead the world down the garden path to the brink of total destruction. Anton Drexler's life is fascinating, and like many other people at that time in German history, slightly underexplored and incredibly overshadowed by other prolific figures at the time. Though his power would ultimately be usurped by one moustached man, Drexler's contribution to the early years of the German Workers' Party cannot be understated. However, let me try to do so now. A locksmith by trade, Drexler was not a well-educated man, nor an overly ambitious one. However, this did not stop him from taking an interest in politics, history, and economics. Prior to World War I, he became involved in trade union activities seeking to address the issues of the working class, a class he was very much a part of. Through these activities and different experiences, Drexler began to gravitate towards nationalist ideologies, believing that socialism and patriotism could be combined to create a national community. This National Socialism formed the cornerstone of his later political ideologies, and obviously would influence further naming conventions for political movements he was a part of. Drexler's vision for a nationalist socialism reflected the anxieties of a post-war Germany struggling to redefine itself. Drawing on national ideas and racial theories popularised by groups like the Thule Society, he sought to build a movement that blamed Germany's struggles on internal enemies like Marxist, international financiers, and Jews, of course. This fusion of economic reform and racial exclusivity became a cornerstone of the DAP's platform. The aftermath of World War I was a turning point for Drexler, which is something that may have been inflamed by him having not participated in the Great War, as he was deemed physically unfit for service. Germany's defeat and the harsh terms of the Treaty of Versailles created an environment of resentment and turmoil, not just with Drexler, but with a vast majority of Germans, even the level-headed ones. But Drexler was not the only one struggling in this climate. Veterans struggled to reintegrate into society, while the cultural dynamic of the Weimar era alienated conservatives. Many, like Drexler, felt that traditional German values were under siege, leading to a channeling of their anxieties into a nationalist vision for the working class. The roots of the German Workers' Party were starting to take shape. The Bolshevik Revolution in Russia influenced similar movements in Germany. These events only further radicalised and hardened Drexler's political thought. All of this led to Drexler co-founding the German Workers' Party, the DAP, in Munich in early 1919. The DAP's platform was infused with anti-Semitism and conspiratorial thinking, targeting Jews as scapegoats for Germany's defeat in World War I and the economic struggles they were currently going through. While such ideas were not unique to the DAP, and that's something to really keep in mind here, they became central to its identity, aligning with the growing wave of nationalist and anti-communist sentiment in post-war Germany. As the leader of the DAP, Drexler released a pamphlet outlining his beliefs. Titled My Political Awakening in the English translation, he called for the following: economic nationalism, which is nationalising key industries and excluding Jews from economic life; social unity, which is overcoming class divisions to create a unified German people; opposition to Versailles, rejecting the Treaty of Versailles as a betrayal of Germany. This was par for the course by this stage. As I mentioned earlier, even the most level-headed German felt strongly about this. And then finally we have anti-Marxism, combating the perceived threat of Bolshevism and international socialism. This pamphlet, however contradictory, would have a profound impact on the future of millions. It underpinned the ideological beliefs of the DAP and would shape members later, as it gave them a springboard to delve deep into their already developing worldviews. The pamphlet also reflected a shift in politics within Germany itself. Instead of the focus being on landowners and the military elite, this pamphlet focused on disillusioned workers, small business owners, and veterans, all those who felt excluded. The DAP's early meetings were held in beer halls, which may be the only part of this story that I agree with. And having been to many a beer hall in Germany and Munich and Oktoberfest itself, they are great places. Great beer, great food, but things said there, while highly inebriated with German beer, should not be acted on the next day, nor the days after. These early meetings attracted disillusioned workers, veterans, and lower middle class individuals, all people ripe for some form of radicalisation. Membership never rose to a high enough number in the early months of the DAP, and we wish it had stayed like that. Unfortunately, that was not the case. A DAP meeting in September 1919 would change everything for everyone, and the world would never be the same. Allow me to introduce the villain in this story, Adolf Hitler. Hitler attended this particular meeting, and can you believe it? He acted like a knob and got into a heated debate during the meeting. Everyone was impressed, but none more so than Drexler, and Drexler invited him to join the party. Now, if I'm to do history any justice, then I need to delve into this man's past, even just a little or a lot, so let's see how it goes. Adolf Hitler, a corporal in the Bavarian Reserve Infantry, experienced the armistice of the 11th of November 1918 with profound disillusionment, which I wish I could say was just a Hitler thing, but the end of the war brought about a sense of disillusionment and sense of loss for people on both sides, for varying reasons. He had served as a dispatch runner on the Western Front, distinguishing himself with bravery and receiving the Iron Cross First Class, which is actually a pretty big deal for a soldier of his rank. Despite this, he remained a lowly enlisted man, which mirrored his civilian life, a failed painter and social outcast. When news of Germany's surrender reached Hitler, he was recovering in hospital from a mustard gas attack that he suffered during the final months of the war. As he recovered, Germany plunged into chaos. Kaiser Wilhelm II abdicating and the rise of the Weimar Republic brought a sense of shame to Hitler and many of his fellow veterans. They had endured the horrors of war, only for their government to then agree to the Treaty of Versailles. They saw this as the ultimate betrayal. And all of this added fuel to the stab-in-the-back myth, claiming that socialists, Jews, and other alleged internal enemies had undermined Germany from within. This began to root itself in Hitler's mind and would dictate some of his decisions taken later on. He would later describe all of this as a personal awakening, his resolve and dedication leading to a life in politics with the aim to restore Germany's greatness. Germany in 1918 and 1919 was a nation in turmoil. The German economy faltered under the weight of the reparations imposed by the Treaty of Versailles. The German political landscape too faltered as left-wing uprisings clashed with reactionary right-wing forces. This created an atmosphere of extremism, fertile grounds for radical ideologies to take hold. After his recovery in hospital, Hitler returned to Munich in late 1918. Munich at the time and into early 1919 was in a state of political anarchy, with assassinations and coups becoming almost commonplace. Hitler, avoiding all of this at the time, re-enlisted in the German army, being assigned to an intelligence and propaganda unit. His task? To monitor political organisations and identify subversive activity. This assignment would have a profound effect on his life, introducing him to public speaking and propaganda, both skills he would use to devastating effect later on. As chance would have it, one of his intelligence duties led him to attend a meeting of the German Workers' Party in September 1919. As Hitler would soon find out, the DAP combined anti-Semitic, anti-communist and nationalist ideologies with a twist of capitalism in there. Hitler was there purely as an observer. However, as the meeting progressed, a member proposed Bavarian secession from Germany. This idea led to an impassioned rebuttal from Hitler, catching the attention of Drexler. Shortly after, Drexler invited Hitler to join the party, making him member number 555. As Hitler rose through the ranks, his charisma and vision began to overshadow Drexler's leadership. Drexler, who preferred the collaborative approach, found himself at odds with Hitler's desire for absolute control and power. While all of this would see Drexler on the sidelines more and more, together, Adolf and Anton put together the DAP's 25-point program in 1920, which focused heavily on the nationalist and anti-Semitic goals of the party. I'll read you out some now. I won't read all of them because I'm not that sadistic. Here's one now. We demand the union of all Germans to form the Greater Germany on the basis of the people's right to self-determination enjoyed by the nations. Here's another. All citizens of the state shall be equal as regards rights and obligations. We demand an expansion on a large scale of old age welfare. Okay, let's see what's next. We demand that the profits from wholesale trade shall be shared out. Okay, some of these aren't so bad. Let's see what else I've got. None but members of the nation may be citizens of the state. None but those of German blood, whatever their creed, may be members of the nation. No Jew, therefore, may be a member of the nation. Okay, so it took a turn for the worse, but let's be honest, we all saw that coming. The thing is, and as we move forward with this topic, you will see this. Very few, if any, of the 25 points were ever actually upheld by the DAP and the subsequent Nazi Party. They picked and chose what they used and when, and bent and broke their own rules just to make sure things worked best for them. The platform they stood upon and built their party off was one based in hate and the desire for power. Though Hitler's history prior to arriving in Munich in 1918 is, well, pretty boring, his time from the 25-point plan onwards starts to get incredibly interesting, if only due to the massive impact he would have on the world as a whole. When the overtly racist 25-point plan was revealed to the world, there were 2,000 people in attendance. This was not the norm for the DAP at this point in time. They were used to just enough people to fill a small broom cupboard. As you could imagine, Hitler stole the show, speaking about abolishing the Treaty of Versailles, unifying all Germans, and as no surprise to anyone, blaming Jews for just about everything wrong in the world. But Hitler didn't stop with the 25-point program. He felt that the DAP needed a facelift, something snappier, with more pizzazz and more punch. And what they came up with was the Nationalist Socialist German Workers' Party, the NSDAP, or as we all know it now, the Nazi Party. But with a snazzy new name, you need a snazzy new logo. The swastika was adopted as the party's emblem. The swastika, an ancient symbol loaded with cultural significance and associated with divinity and spirituality, was twisted into a symbol of Aryan supremacy. In fact, a lot of ancient lore was taken by the Nazis and completely turned on its head to try and make it out that somehow the German Aryans were the chosen ones and were meant to rule the earth, which I might do as an episode later on, but it will truly complete my descent into madness. Anyway, we're moving on. Hitler had the new party name and a fancy emblem to go with it. Now, all he needed was to be the leader of this snazzy little party. See, as Hitler's popularity grew, so did his ego. So by 1921, just being a cog in the machine that was the Nazis wasn't enough. Adolf, and this would be a common theme for him over the coming years, wanted total control and absolute power. But not everyone wanted that. So Hitler, doing what he did best, acted like an absolute child and threw a tantrum, leading to him quitting the party. He hedged his bets though, thinking that his absence would lead to other members begging for him to return. And he was spot on. Hitler returned to the Nazi Party as the Führer, which had so much more punch than just the manager. Drexler had been pushed out of the spotlight, totally eclipsed by Hitler. The party he had co-founded was now hijacked for Hitler's ambitions, leaving Anton Drexler all but erased from Nazi history. But for Hitler, you can't have this fancy new political party with its fancy new name and fancy new emblem without band of thugs. So, we now have the brown shirts, or the SA, or the Sturmenabteilung. I butchered that, so I'm just going to call them the SA from here on in. The SA functioned as a combo of security force and street gang. They drew heavily on the Freikorps, a network of paramilitary groups that had fought leftist uprisings after World War I. These men, hardened by war and disillusioned by the Weimar Republic, were eager to continue their fighting. Under Hitler's leadership, they guarded Nazi rallies and meetings, disrupted opponents' rallies and meetings, and engaged in street brawls with communists. The streets of Munich quickly turned into a battleground of fists and broken beer bottles. The brawls actually became such a problem that in certain areas, glass ashtrays and beer bottles were outlawed because people were using them too much when they got into fights. Anyway, but it wasn't all beer hall brawls and fist fights for the Nazi Party and the SA, because by 1923, Germany was in a shambles. Hyperinflation was making money practically worthless, and the Weimar Republic, the presiding government at this time, looked like it might collapse at any moment due to its own incompetence. The Weimar Republic faced threats from all sides, with the ongoing hyperinflation being one of many issues. On the left, communists sought to emulate the Bolshevik Revolution, leading to uprising like the Spartacus Revolt in 1919. On the right, nationalist groups and Freikorps paramilitaries plotted coups, including the Kapp Push in 1920. Violence became a regular feature of German politics, with street clashes between rival groups symbolising the fractured state of the nation. In all of this chaos, Hitler saw an opportunity. Inspired by Mussolini's March on Rome in 1922, Hitler thought he could do the same in Munich. On the evening of the 8th November 1923, the infamous beer hall push would commence, or push. Hitler and his SA stormed the Bürgerbraukeller, a beer hall in Munich where Bavarian leaders Gustav von Kahr, Hans von Caesar, and Otto von Lossow, butchered that, were addressing a crowd. Bursting in with his pistol out, Hitler fired a shot into the ceiling, declaring, "The national revolution has begun." Strong and very optimistic words from the Führer. Having set quite the tone for an impending revolution, Hitler dragged the 3 Bavarian leaders into a side room, demanding they support his coup. Feeling under pressure and probably doing their best not to laugh at the small mustached man, they all agreed. Hitler, satisfied, returned to the main hall and began to ramble on about saving Germany. As expected, because they are at a beer hall, the crowd was proper drunk and cheered on everything Hitler had to say. As things progressed, things started to unravel. The 3 Bavarian leaders, once free from the beer hall, which they had been released from, went straight to the authorities. Hitler, unaware of this betrayal, spent the night organising his followers for the next day's action, taking control of Munich. The next day, Hitler marched through Munich with an intent to seize government buildings, with 2,000 of his men in tow, including members of the SA, World War I vets, and others. As this was happening, Ernst Röhm, leader of the SA at the time, had already taken control of some military barracks within Munich. As they marched, some carried flags with the swastika on them. Once they had reached the Feldherrnhall, the Field Marshal's Hall, things got bad. There they were met by a line of armed police, about 100 of them, with some additional reinforcements behind them. Eyewitnesses describe it as a chaotic and confused scene with people shouting and giving orders. Shots rang out. 16 Nazis were killed. 4 police officers were killed, with many on both sides wounded. Unfortunately, Hitler survived, only suffering a dislocated shoulder. However, the man next to him would be shot and killed. Slight side note, one of the Nazi flags being carried during this whole saga was later dubbed the Blood Flag, as it was soaked in the blood of an SA member who died. The flag would then become a prized possession for the Nazis and used to consecrate new flags for the party whenever they touched it. They used this all up to the war and then throughout the war as well. I think that SA member might have been the one that was standing next to Hitler, but don't quote me on that. Back to the beer hall push. So why did it collapse in such a spectacular fashion? Well, a few reasons. We've got lack of coordination and planning. There was no cohesive agreed upon strategy. There was an over-reliance on the Bavarian leadership of Kahr, Caesar and Lassault, and there was no military support. Mussolini, when he did this in 1922, had the backing of different factions within the Italian military. Hitler did not. Further dooming it was overconfidence and poor execution. Hitler believed their march would inspire the whole nation, and he underestimated the opposition that he would face. He also wasted valuable time trying to organise the march for the day after it all started, and the 2,000 troops he had with him lacked discipline and coordination. Anyway, the coup collapsed and was broken up by the police. Hitler fled and was arrested 2 days later, whilst hiding at a supporter's home. Embarrassed and sore from the whole incident, Hitler would have to face the music for his treasonous actions. And that's exactly where we'll pick back up on the next episode of History: A Dog's Breakfast. Hope you've enjoyed this introduction into German history. We're going to take a few episodes to step through it because it's just going to get more and more interesting as we go through. So I hope you enjoyed it. Take care of yourselves and take care of each other. Cheers.